It was Friday, November 22nd, 1963. The place was Dallas, Texas, a city buzzing with energy, nervous anticipation, and a crowd that had gathered not to protest, but to see history passing by right in front of their eyes. For millions of people around the world, the name John Fitzgerald Kennedy represented more than just a president. He represented youth, vitality, and a promise for the future. He was the man who had challenged the nation to go to the moon, who had stood firm against the threat of nuclear war. But on this particular day, he was not in the secure confines of Washington, D.C. He was here, in Texas, on a political mission to unite a fractured party. The plan was simple. The presidential motorcade would drive from Love Field Airport through the heart of downtown Dallas, ending at the Trade Mart, where the president would give a luncheon speech. It was a route mapped out in the newspapers, visible to everyone. It was meant to be a display of confidence, an open invitation for the people to see their leader. Thousands of people lined the streets. They stood behind metal barriers, leaned out of office windows, and held their children up on their shoulders. The atmosphere was electric. There was a sense of celebration in the air. People waved small American flags. They cheered. They smiled. Inside the lead car, a custom-built, open-top Lincoln convertible, the mood was relaxed. The president sat in the rear right seat, wearing his dark gray suit and blue tie, looking out at the crowds, waving his hand in that slow, deliberate manner that was so uniquely his. To his left sat the First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, elegant in a dusty pink suit and matching pillbox hat. In front of them sat Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie. Up front, behind the wheel, was Secret Service Agent William Greer, and beside him, Agent Roy Kellerman, responsible for the safety of the most important man in the free world. The car moved slowly. It had to. The crowds were thick. They turned onto Main Street, and the noise was deafening. The cheering was constant, a wall of sound that wrapped around the vehicle. For a moment, it seemed like everything was going perfectly. The trip was a success. The people loved them. But then, the procession made a sharp turn. It slowed down significantly to navigate the corner from Houston Street onto Elm Street. It was a necessary maneuver, but it brought the heavy car down to a crawl, perhaps no faster than 10 or 15 miles an hour. They were now passing through a place called Dealey Plaza. To their right stood the imposing red brick structure of the Texas School Book Depository Building. It looked like any other office building, quiet, normal, unassuming. Nobody knew it then, but history was about to change forever. Nellie Connally turned around in her seat, looking back at the president and the First Lady. She smiled and said the words that would be the last peaceful words they would ever hear. She said, "Mr. President, you certainly can't say that Dallas doesn't love you." John Kennedy smiled back. He opened his mouth to reply. That was when the silence was broken. It was a noise that cut through the air like a knife. To some people standing on the grass below, it sounded like a firecracker. It sounded like a joke or a celebration. Some people laughed, thinking it was a prank. But inside the car, they knew instantly. This was not celebration. This was violence. Governor Connally heard the sound. He had been in the military. He knew the sound of gunfire. His instincts took over. He began to turn his body, looking over his right shoulder, trying to locate the source. Then, another shot rang out. This time, there was no doubt. The bullet struck the president in the upper back, just below the neckline of his suit jacket. It passed through his body, exiting through his throat. The force of it snapped his head forward violently. His hands immediately flew up to his neck and throat area. He did not scream. He simply made a low, guttural noise, a look of confusion and pain washing over his face. The same bullet instantly struck Governor Connally. The bullet tore through his chest, shattering a rib, then passing through his right wrist, and finally coming to rest deep in his left thigh. The governor slumped over. He later said he knew immediately what had happened. He thought, "My God, they are going to kill us all." Nellie Connolly grabbed her husband, pulling him down into her lap. "No, no, no," she whispered, holding him as blood began to stain his suit. Jacqueline Kennedy turned towards her husband. She saw him sitting there, his hands clutching his throat, his eyes looking puzzled, as if he didn't understand what was happening to him. She reached out for him, starting to say his name. Then came the third shot. This was the shot that ended a life and shattered a nation. According to the official investigation, it was the final shot fired from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. It struck President Kennedy in the head, causing catastrophic injuries. Witnesses saw blood and fragments spray across the back of the car as the president's body collapsed toward Jacqueline Kennedy. The president's head snapped back violently and to the left. His body went limp. He slid sideways across the leather seat towards his wife. Chaos does not even begin to describe what happened next. Secret Service agent Clint Hill was riding on the running board of the follow-up car. He saw the shots hit. He ran as fast as he had ever run in his life, sprinting across the tarmac, leaping onto the back of the president's car to protect them. He saw Mrs. Kennedy climb out onto the trunk of the car, reaching back, trying to grasp a piece of her husband's skull that had been blown off. Hill shouted at her to get back, pushing her gently but firmly into the seat, covering the president's body with his own. "Get us to the hospital, fast!" Agent Kellerman shouted into the radio. Driver Bill Greer didn't need to be told twice. He slammed his foot onto the accelerator. The heavy Lincoln lurched forward, tires screeching, leaving the plaza behind. The siren began to wail, a high-pitched scream that seemed to express the agony of the moment. Inside the car, there was silence, broken only by the sound of the engine and the sobbing of the First Lady. She held her husband's head in her lap, trying to stop the bleeding, but it was useless. The life was already leaving his eyes. Governor Connolly was in severe pain, bleeding heavily, but he was alive. The ride to Parkland Hospital seemed to take an eternity, though it was only a few minutes. When they burst through the entrance doors, the emergency team was waiting. They pulled the president out, carried him on a stretcher, rushing him into Trauma Room 1. The doors swung shut, sealing off the world outside. Doctors and nurses worked with frantic speed. They cut off his clothes. They tried to massage his heart. They inserted tubes. They administered drugs. But the wound was too great. The damage was too extensive. It was a wound that no medicine, no skill, no miracle could repair. At exactly 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, the doctors stepped back. They looked at their watches. They confirmed what their hands had already known. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was dead. He was 46 years old. Outside the small room, the world was falling apart. Reporters were gathering. The news was spreading like wildfire. People stopped what they were doing. They stood in silence. They cried. Meanwhile, back in Dealey Plaza, the police had reacted instantly. The moment the shots were fired, officers were pointing towards the book depository building. They saw the movement at the 6th floor window. They stormed the building. On the 6th floor, hidden behind stacks of book boxes, they found the weapon. A 6.5mm Mannlicher Carcano rifle. They found cartridge casings on the floor. They found the sniper's nest, perfectly positioned to look down on Elm Street. The manhunt was on. The suspect had left the building almost immediately after the shots. He walked out the front door, calmly, blending into the confusion. He boarded a bus, then transferred to a taxi, heading towards his rooming house. He grabbed his jacket and his pistol. He was walking down a street when police officer J.D. Tippett spotted him, thought he matched the description, and pulled over to question him. Without hesitation, the man pulled out a handgun and fired 4 times. Officer Tippit fell dead, another casualty of this terrible day. Now the killer was running. He ducked into a movie theater, the Texas Theater, trying to hide in the darkness. But an alert ticket clerk had noticed him slipping in without paying. Police surrounded the building. They rushed inside, flashlights cutting through the dark. "Police!" an officer shouted. The man stood up. He reportedly shouted, "This is it," and reached for his gun. But he was overwhelmed. They tackled him to the floor. They handcuffed him. His name was Lee Harvey Oswald. He was brought into police headquarters, a thin, pale man with hollow eyes. He told them he was a patsy. He said he didn't kill anyone. But the evidence was mounting. The rifle had his fingerprints. The witnesses identified him. 2 days later, the world watched live on television. Oswald was being led through the basement of the police station, being transferred to the county jail. Cameras were rolling. Suddenly, a man stepped out from the crowd. He was Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner. He pulled out a .38 revolver and fired a single shot directly into Oswald's stomach. The assassin of the president was dead, killed on live TV, before he could ever stand trial, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt America for generations. The official investigation concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald had acted entirely alone. But the questions remain. The physics of the bullets, the direction of the wounds, the speed of the events, it has all been debated and argued over for decades. But for those who were there, standing on Elm Street that day, the facts are not theories. They are memories burned into their souls. They remember the sound. They remember the blood. They remember that in just 6 seconds, a leader fell, and the world changed forever.